You've got Laura here, and today we are going to talk about PEDs and our beauty. This is a little bit of a controversial topic and one that I've been thinking about bringing to those of you that follow my channel, those of you that are interested in this topic, primarily my female competitors, my bikini, wellness, figure, physique, fitness athletes, all of you female bodybuilders. This is a topic that I don't think is talked about enough. It is becoming more and more present as time goes on, as bikini and all of these divisions become more competitive. So I really want to give you the perspective of an IFBB pro who's been competing for years, who's seen how these divisions have evolved, how the use of PEDs in females has evolved too. And while everyone is different, there are a lot of trends. So I want to break this all down for you guys. But before we do that, let's make sure to like the video. Please subscribe to the channel so I can grow, and let's jump right into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the fact that there are both temporary and permanent side effects. And everything I'm sharing today, first of all, I want to say it is not medical advice. And I also want to really make sure that you are not doing anything illegal. I do not recommend doing anything illegal. I do not recommend taking illegal drugs. And I do not recommend taking anything prescribed without the direction of a medical professional. So with all of that in mind, a lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today is based in scientific fact, and it's also based on my experience as an IFBB pro. So granted, my experience is individual to me. What I see and observe are my opinions. So with that in mind, I do want to share the fact that there are first both temporary and permanent side effects. And really, I guess where all of this is coming from and what I'm observing is over the last few years, I've really noticed how much facial changes are happening in bikini athletes. And some people have told me that they don't see what I'm seeing, they don't understand. But I want to give you the perspective. I'm someone who's been attending shows at the NPC and pro level consistently since 2018. I also am a very detail-oriented person. I used to work in engineering. The company I worked for did drinking water treatment. So we all had a little bit of OCD and a lot of attention to detail. I notice everything. I notice every little detail. I notice if one of my hairs is out of place, everything. So with that in mind, I really am very cognizant of myself and also in my fellow competitors, and I can spot when changes are happening. And part of the normal aging process as a woman does mean that our beauty and our facial structure may change. However, as we age, what happens in humans is our face actually elongate. Our faces do elongate, our ears grow, our nose grow. These things that are soft cartilage continue growing. However, when we are taking things like anabolic steroids or other PEDs, what can happen is our jaw can actually widen. And I'm going to get into all this in more detail, but I really just want to point out that I'm seeing changes in not just pro level competitors, but amateur competitors that I never used to see in the last 1 to 2 years. I've been at all these shows, I can't even tell you, probably hundreds and hundreds of shows over the last 6 to 7 years. And only in the last 1 to 2 years have I really noticed that even amateur competitors are starting to have masculinized faces. And for me as a bikini pro and as a coach, I do find it a bit troubling. And again, this is just my opinion. I do find it a bit troubling because from my perspective and what really made me fall in love with competing in the bikini division itself was this really beautiful, feminine, muscular look. I loved how bikini athletes and figure athletes looked back then. Figure pros, when I was starting, it was around 2014, 2015 when I was getting into it and deciding I wanted to compete. I wasn't competing yet. And back then, the figure pros had the level of muscularity and conditioning that bikini pros have now. Bikini pros back then did not have the same muscle mass, did not have the same look. And it's because our PED use has increased. Yes, the sport's gotten more competitive, but what does that really mean? Athletes are willing to do whatever it takes to get to the top. And for a lot of people, that really means taking more drugs. And so when I see this division that truly is this beautiful, feminine, muscular, ultimately, even if it's not natural, a natural look, becoming more masculinized. And I see even very young athletes, like in their 20s, with faces that start to look male. Like if you took their makeup off and you just looked at them from the neck above, if they looked like a male versus a female because of their bone structure and where their facial fat sits, to me, we are losing the point of what bikini is, and it is troublesome. And I do want to talk about it because I know while there are many people that probably disagree with me and maybe don't see this from the perspective that I do, I at least want to provide valuable information to young women and new athletes to the sport, because I've had to learn a lot of this by trial and error. When I started, and I started back early 2017, my first prep started in 2016, there was not all this information out there available. There were some random little forums and random sketchy websites where you could try to look up information about PEDs, but there was really not much available. It was not in vogue to talk about this. I didn't know if pros or female athletes were even taking anything to look the way they did. I had some suspicions. I definitely had some suspicions that some of them did, because when I would look in the magazines, back then there wasn't so much content on social media. It was a lot of magazines. I would see women with hairlines that were very receded, like very, very unnaturally large looking foreheads. And I had a feeling that, okay, these women are probably doing something weird if their foreheads look like that, but I didn't know what was going on. And so really my goal here is to provide a lot of valuable information so that you, whether you're a competitor or not, or just thinking about getting into this, or you're well into your journey and maybe you're considering PED use, maybe you're already a PED user and you're thinking about these things, I just want to provide valuable information and perspective so that we can be open and safe and transparent about what's going on. So let's talk about both temporary and permanent side effects of PED use. And I'm going to start with temporary. So the first one is going to be acne. If we're using anabolic steroids, and that can be everything from Anavar to TRT to Primobolan, Masteron, everything, any of those things are going to increase the oil production in your skin. And anecdotally, we do tend to see that we might get more of this acne when we're coming on or off a cycle. Or if we're doing something like TRT, you may not even notice acne at all, because it's such a low dose that you're really just helping your body's natural hormone levels find their equilibrium. But what's going to happen when we're taking anabolic steroids is we're going to create more sebum, S-E-B-U-M, not sebum, the bodybuilder, sebum, which is oil. And our pores are going to get larger. They're going to produce more oil. That is a byproduct of the anabolic steroids. And we're going to get more breakouts. That could be on our face, that could be on our body. And while this can be controlled with topical acne treatments or more heavy-duty treatments like Accutane, you want to be mindful, because something, for example, like Accutane, which is quite strong and can handle these very intense cystic breakouts, it also impacts the liver. And if we're taking an oral anabolic like Anavar or any oral anabolic steroid, that also impacts the liver. So you're going to be doubling the hepatotoxicity. You're going to be doubling the toxicity to your liver by trying to control your acne. So make sure you're smart about it. If you're not okay with the side effects that you're getting, consider not doing what you're doing. Or also remember too that if you're using something prescription, I don't really think it's available anymore, but up until last year, Anavar was available prescribed in the US. So when you're getting something prescribed, you know that it is coming from a pharmaceutical manufacturer. You have a lot better indication of the quality and the purity. There may not be impurities in there that could potentially be causing or exacerbating the breakouts as well. So that's a common side effect that I hear too, and from my mentors, and especially those that coach males, where PED use is such a heavy aspect of the sport. They really talk about the fact that having quality supplements is going to reduce the likelihood of acne, because if you have impurities, etc., you're even doubling, you're going to increase the risk that you get something like that. But again, this is temporary. Another potential permanent / temporary side effect is alopecia. And alopecia is a term for hair loss. And this could be throughout our body, but primarily the hair on our head, right? So when we think about this, a lot of times we think about male bodybuilders losing their hair, going bald. And this is because anabolics are going to increase our body's production of DHT, which can then cause male pattern or female pattern balding. So even as a female, if we have any little genetic predisposition, taking any type of anabolic, whether it is testosterone, again, Anavar, etc., whatever that is, you could be predisposing yourself to hair loss. And so what we see in women, and what this can typically look like, is just like I was describing earlier, those women where it almost looks like they have like a 5 head, right? Like their forehead is so large and we see their hair come like all the way back here. That is a sign that they are exposing themselves to high levels of androgens, or they potentially just have bad genetics for hair loss. And you combine that too with intense diets, intense calorie deprivation, and you could exacerbate that further. So alopecia is something that for most women, there are some topical treatments. I believe finasteride has a topical version that's available for women. Some of these oral supplements that men can take are not FDA approved for women because of the hormonal side effects. But I believe there are some topicals. And the other thing too is just discontinuing the anabolic. So oftentimes when women experience that, they can regrow their hair by discontinuing that PED use, letting it regrow. However, if you say just genetically have very poor genetics for hair loss, you might find that this is something more stubborn and could potentially be more permanent. So something to keep in mind. I know as a woman, I would be very sad if I started to have hair loss. I have known friends and fellow athletes that take oxandrolone or Anavar and they start to experience hair loss. So even if you're taking something very mild, it does not mean that you cannot have a side effect. And then the last thing too that can happen when we are taking anabolics is we do tend to lose, and this is well documented in the scientific literature, we lose facial fat. So as women, again, we have a more plump, a more watery look than men. We have much more estrogen than they do. So when we start to lose our facial fat, not just from dieting, because obviously, yes, we're going to lose it during dieting, but also through our anabolic use, it's going to create a more sunken in, a more wrinkled look, a more aged look. Even if we're young, even if we're in our 20s, we're going to look much more hollow here and just, again, not as traditionally feminine. And if you're okay with that, amazing. For myself, feel free to judge me. I'm a bit, if you want to call me vain, whatever that is. For me, I've been realizing over the last year or so just how extreme the PED use can be in bikini. I'm not saying this is everyone. I'm not saying any particular athlete. I'm not talking about anyone specific. But for me, what I've really realized is that one of the hard boundaries that I have for myself is obviously I would like to be one of the top athletes in the world. I'm not willing to sacrifice my femininity. I'm not willing to look overly masculine to do this. For me, bikini has always been about feminine and a feminine, beautiful look, feminine muscle. And for me, if my face starts to change in ways that I cannot undo, I would be very sad. So something like facial fat, this could be potentially permanent if you don't do anything about it. However, nowadays we do have all these amazing Botox and filler injectable tools at our disposal. So if you're finding that you're losing a lot of facial fat, number one, you can even work with a cosmetic surgeon and have a fat transfer, say in your off season where you have a little more fat, you can take it from your belly or somewhere else and fill it in. Or you can also use facial fillers. So for me personally, I like to use a bit of cheek filler, and I don't have a lot right now, but I'm full off season, you guys. So I'm almost 20 pounds above my stage weight. I have fat. I have fat in my face. I have fat in my low back. I have fat on my butt. I have fat on my legs. I have fat everywhere, right? So just remember that dieting chronically, using anabolics is going to deplete your facial fat. And so you can really counteract this if that's something that is important to you through the use of facial fillers or potentially a fat transfer. So those are what I would consider all of the temporary side effects. Let's talk a little bit about the permanent side effects. And the first one I want to talk about is vocal deepening. Part of growing older as a woman, your voice does deepen a little bit. When you're taking a high amount of androgens or you're taking androgens over a long period of time, even if it's something more mellow with a lower androgen index than Anavar. And remember too that all of these anabolics, they have a different amount of androgen. So for example, Primobolan and Winstrol are going to have more androgens than something like Anavar. However, if you are taking something lower in androgens like Anavar over a consistent period of time or extremely long cycles, over time, what happens is our vocal cords thicken. Just like all of our muscles, our vocal cords are muscles. They are going to thicken and grow, just like our shoulders, just like our glutes, just like our hamstrings, our quads, our delts, all of that. So your vocal cords are going to thicken. And this is something that cannot really be reversed. The only strategy I'm familiar with to try to reverse vocal deepening, which again, this is a permanent side effect. This is something, my ladies, once your voice is deep, like once you sound very deep, it's going to be hard to come back from that. And the only technique I've really heard or only solution I've heard is working with a speech therapist like those that are transgender work with. So you can I'm not sure how effective this is, but potentially one solution is to try to find a speech therapist and learn to retrain how you speak. And this is something I've even thought about at times, like when I was getting criticism online and I was feeling sad. I've thought about that. I remember even doing Google searches at one point of could I find a speech therapist to help me? And ultimately, I think the decision for me is there are many women, and I've had clients in the past where they've told me, look, Laura, I don't care if my voice completely changes. I don't care if I sound like a man on the phone or in person. I'm fine with it. And hey, that is okay. You're an adult. That's your decision to make. However, for myself, I know that I would not feel okay. I would not feel good about myself if for the rest of my life, someone picked up the phone with me and they could not tell if I was a man or a woman or potentially transgender. I know I would feel very sad and I wouldn't feel very feminine and I would feel like I've made a choice that I don't feel proud of. So again, this is such a tough topic because it's so loaded and I don't feel like there is enough real information about this out there. So that's why I'm trying to bring this to you ladies so you can really think about what you're okay with, what you're not, and you can understand the risks of the choices that you may be making or the choices that you may be considering alongside the vocal deepening, because again, our vocal cords are muscles. We can also have thickening of the jawline muscles. So I think these are our masseter muscles are the primary ones. As we take anabolic steroids, those are going to grow along with everything else. Okay, so we can start to have a wider jawline. And this actually brings me to my next point. They're sort of interrelated. One of the PEDs that I haven't touched on is human growth hormone. And this is available by prescription in the US. It can be very anti-aging. It helps essentially create non-specific cell growth. So it can be helpful for healing, for injury, for anti-aging. A lot of times those that are a little older can take this for a little bit more energy, muscle mass, etc. However, it causes non-specific cell growth, meaning it's not just going to grow your muscles, it's going to grow your bones, it's going to grow connective tissues, it's going to grow everything. And so with that, it can cause what is called acromegaly, which is the growth of our jawbones, our fingers, our toes. And at times I've even heard anecdotally, although I would need to go back to the literature and look at this, I believe it can also grow the bones of your forehead and of your skull. As an example, back in the day, if you remember when steroids in baseball was a large controversial topic, Barry Bonds was an example of this. And if you guys remember, that was when his hat size changed. So he was claiming he's not taking anything, but yet as an adult man, his hat size was literally growing because his head was growing from use of growth hormone. So I don't think the dosages women typically use, like even the highest I've ever heard of for women, which again are going to be loaded with risks, is more of like 4 IU per day. I don't know if that's every day or not. You're gonna expose yourself to more risk. Male bodybuilders take double that or more if they can, if they have the funds to afford that much. It's a pricier supplement, but that jawline growth can happen, particularly when you are combining human growth hormone with an anabolic steroid. Because think about it this way. So now we are taking an anabolic, which is going to grow the muscles here, and we're also taking something that is going to grow the bone. And so what we start to have and what you can start to see, and this is something I'm observing, and there are those that argue with me, but I see what I see, and you can literally go to the photos on NPC News Online and compare a specific athlete. If you know someone who's experienced this, or you think someone's face has changed and you're not really sure, you can go back and compare their side by sides of their stage photos. But what you'll see is you'll see like a bony lump on one side or both. It may or may not be symmetrical, but I'm seeing so much of this, you guys. I see so much of these jawlines at the amateur level, at the pro level as well. Of course, pros, we're going to do whatever we can essentially to get to the top as a pro athlete. However, it's just scary to me. It's scary to me that there are these young women that are beautiful in their 20s, and to me, they are discarding their facial feminine beauty like it has no value. And maybe I sound old-fashioned, maybe I sound misogynistic in some way. These women are all adults, so they're free to make their choices, but I think a lot of times this is happening without women realizing the potential consequences of what they're doing. And I'm not even talking about, you guys, I'm not even really talking about the health risks of doing any PED or any combination of PED. I'm literally just talking about the effects to your beauty, the effects to your feminine beauty as a woman, because many of us, I think, also hold our feminine beauty maybe in higher regard than our health. If you actually look at our actions, if you actually look at how much we spend on facial fillers and Botox and, cool sculpting treatments and facials and haircuts and all of these things, we might spend way more on our feminine beauty than we do on our health. And so it does really scare me that I'm seeing so much facial change in the bikini division. And there's this word out there called virilization. And essentially what this means is masculinization. And I see this happening rampantly in bikini. In wellness, wellness is a new division, but it's pretty well established because the amount of steroid use needed to have a high level wellness physique is quite high. Most of those women, they have very deep in voices. They may look very feminine, but there are also, and to be fair, the jawline growth, I believe, can be corrected if you go get a facial surgery where you have your bone shaved down. And so I think some of these athletes will do that too. So perhaps there is that option there. However, that's going to be an expensive, probably painful, not risk-free elective surgery to go get your jaw shaved down if it does grow. So with all that said, I hope this was empowering. I hope this wasn't overly one-sided because, again, I've shared openly, I don't claim to be a natural athlete. However, it is very important for me to maintain my long-term health, to maintain my femininity, and to have a good quality life as a bikini pro. I want to get to the top, but I'm not willing to throw my health or my femininity in the trash to do so. And so that may limit me. I don't know yet. I'm not done. I'm not done yet competing. But I really want to provide you, the listener, the viewer, good information so that you understand what the potential risks are. And perhaps I'll do another video on health. I've done a video in the past on PEDs for bikini and for female competitors that was very well received. So I know it's a bit controversial. I know it's a bit taboo to talk about these things. I know it's a little bit unpleasant, but I want to present this information in a way that's easy to understand. And I'll cite the main resource I'm using for some of these concepts that I'm talking about. My favorite resource, one of my favorite resources, there is this book called The Bible of Bodybuilding, written by an MD who is a national level competitor in Greece, also speaks English. He wrote this book. I also use J3U. That is another great resource where you guys can go do online courses and learn about all these things too. So I'm not just talking out of my butt. There's facts behind all of this. So I hope this was helpful. If you guys have questions, drop them in the comments. If you want more videos like this, please let me know, and I will catch you in the next one.